have a lot of local unions now protesting about some of the distances they're going to move mail to be processed in these larger facilities. And if you move mail too far, then you're slowing down the service to the people of the country.
Are you on? Which side are you on?
We now have on the line National President of the American Postal Workers Union, representing some 200,000 postal workers across the country, President Mark Dimondstein. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for making the time this morning.
Well, thanks for having me, Jacob, and greetings to you and all your good listeners.
Absolutely. So, can you talk to us about your, what was it that brought you into the labor movement? Why, why is this something that you have decided, you want to devote basically your life to?
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, the basic question is, I went to work at the post office and had the opportunity to join a union. Now, I did grow up in a household that was sympathetic to unions. I knew unions were good for workers. And so when I went to work at the post office, that was my first opportunity to go to work in a workplace that already had a union. So I readily joined and raised my hand to get involved. And we thought that I went to work in Greensboro, North Carolina at the post office. And I always respect others who are willing to step up and lead, but we thought there were some shortcomings. We thought we could do better. And so I got involved with the union. Next thing I knew is my coworkers were coming to me and said, "We need you as our local president." So I stepped up there. Over the years, I did organizing. And at some point, we thought we needed to make changes in our national union. And we stepped up and ran a team. And in 2013, I assumed the office of national president. But you don't have to be a national president or a local president or a branch president to play a role in helping to build more power for workers. In our case, for postal workers, but all workers. We're part of a big movement. And so I was always just willing to raise my hand. I was never raising my hand, Jacob, with the idea that I would one day be local president or be national president. I raised my hand and got involved because I wanted a better workplace, a safer workplace, more organized workplace. And of course, the stronger the union are, the better the conditions are that we work under, the better our pay and benefits are. So it's probably a typical story like many. We all have to make a living, and we want to make the best living we can. And the union is a wonderful vehicle to do that. But it has to be driven well. It has to be steered well. So if anybody out there is listening in a union, I certainly hope you're involved. You stay involved. You get more involved. And we row together to get an ever more powerful labor movement. And we certainly have a lot of work to do as
Absolutely.
the labor movement of the United States.
There's definitely a lot of work to do. And I find that is a lot of, there are a lot of positions that folks kind of wind up in because they were one of the only people to be willing to raise their hand. Because there's a lot of work to be done, and it's difficult work, right? It's, I mean, that's how.
Well, Jacob, it might be difficult at times, but it's also joyous work.
Yes.
It's a wonderful and important cause. And so I don't want anybody to shy away, because sometimes it can get a little rocky and difficult. I can't think of anything better to go through our lives with than a cause for justice,
Right.
social justice, workplace justice. So I hope when people get involved, they also get the joy out of it. Of being something bigger than all of us individually, but individually something we can all help build and play a role in.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And APWU here, I've got a soft spot in my heart for your union. They were one of the 5 unions that came together with my union to reconstitute the North Alabama Labor Council. And so they were very helpful in reconstituting that after it was dechartered back in 2017. And and one of your members are now Secretary Treasurer of the labor council in North Alabama.
Right.
And so we're really appreciative for having y'all be part of making the labor council active again. I think it's
Well,
a
you
very
know,
important
yeah,
institution. So
that's interesting because as postal workers, we know we have to have a lot of alliances and solidarity with the labor movement and the community and the people of the
right.
country to keep the post office strong. But that solidarity always has to be a 2 and 3 and 4-way street. So I'm really glad to hear that our local folks out there are part of the broader labor movement. So we don't just expect people to stand with us. We expect our people to stand with all workers and beyond workers, many of the struggles that our communities have for justice.
Right. And so, the Postal Service has been going through a lot of changes recently, and there's been some amount of controversy over some of the changes, and some of them have been kind of, not really remarked on. But Trump appointed Louis DeJoy, I think is Louis, not Louis, Louis DeJoy, to be Postmaster General over the Postal Service, and he has this 10-year plan to modernize the Postal Service. There's been, like I said, there's been a lot of controversy, but my understanding is that your union has been working with him and with the Postal Service to try to, make the best of this plan, because, the idea that the Postal Service needs to be modernized, or there are things that we can improve on, that seems, that doesn't seem very controversial, and that seems like something we should be able to agree on, that we want to improve things. It's just the devil's in the details, and I think a lot of union members, particularly when we hear calls for modernization from management, we get spooked real easy, right? But we want to approach things skeptically, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? So talk to us about the Postal Service and some of the recent changes and this 10-year plan to modernize the Postal Service.
Sure, I'll be happy to. Just one quick correction, though. The President of the United States does not appoint the Postmaster General. The President of the United States, with Senate confirmation, appoints the Postal Board of Governors, which when it's full is 9 people. It's the Postal Board of Governors that hires and fires the PMG. But he did come in when Trump was in office, and the PMG does apparently come out of the more conservative political world. But in terms of what's happening now, Jacob, it's complicated like it always is. And we try to stick with the issues. So there are things in this. The post office has always had 5-year plans, 10-year plans. They're written words on a piece of paper. Louis DeJoy is very aggressive about carrying that out. And but we try to stick to the issue. So I've called the 10-year plan the good, bad, and the ugly. That means there are things in it we like. For example, this was the first postal plan in decades that advocated for making 6-day delivery part of the law. It was not part of the law before. We had to deal with it every year. And our sister union, the National Association of Letter Carriers, that was obviously vitally important to them. But it's important to all the customers, and it's important to all of us that work in the post office, because we wanted to be vibrant and robust, and there for the needs of the people. There were things in the 10-year plan that acknowledged a multi-tier worker system that had a lot of what we call non-careers, so didn't have the full load of benefits, didn't have the full wages. Was something that we had to fix, and there needed to be a better path to career employment in the Postal Service. There's also some new ideas in the plan about new services in the retail units, and that's very important to us. So those are some of the examples in the good, bad, and the ugly of the good. And by the way, the 10-year plan, different than previous plans, remove the anti-worker and anti-union ideas that were in earlier plans. So we were pleased about that. But then we get to the ugly. They slowed down mail under this plan based on distance. We opposed it. We generated 130,000 emails, and some of your listeners may have been part of that to try to stop it. We did not succeed, but we certainly oppose that. And we have some serious concerns about this modernization plan, that it also may slow down mail. And whatever modernization or optimization is going on, we're very, very strong and outspoken that the service has to get better. It's not where it should be. There are many reasons for that. This administration and postal management inherited some of those problems, but DeJoy is now the captain of the ship. So I think it's mixed. Now, the plan itself, does the postal network need to be modernized? Probably it does. And why? One is mail is very much changing. The mail mix is changing. Seeing you on the screen, I know that you're young, at least compared to me. I have 3 daughters, grown adult daughters. They don't get their bills in the mail, and they don't pay their bills through the mail. My wife and I do. So it's a changing world. And my 3 daughters are like tens of millions of other people that pay their bills online. They don't do it to save a stamp, the price of a stamp. They do it because it's so easy and so convenient. But we have a saying in our union that the internet taketh and the internet giveth. So while there's been a huge diversion of letter mail onto the internet, in fact, letter mail is down over 50% from 2007, 2008 period. And that's very troubling for the finances of the post office. And your listeners may know or may not know that the Postal Reorganization Act of 1970 eliminated the taxpayer funding of the post office, and the post office has to run off revenue. So when the letter mail is cut in half, that affects revenue. But the internet also giveth. And so we have this whole growth of package and e-commerce, and it accelerated during the COVID pandemic, where package growth is a large part of our future. Now, that doesn't mean we want the Postal Service and to become a third package delivery company in the United States. Mail is still vitally important to people, whether it's mail ballots, whether it's greeting cards, whether it's financial transactions, whether it's medicines. Mail is vitally important for the people of the country. But we also know to have enough revenue to meet the demands of the people of the country, delivering to over 160 million addresses every day and 1 million new addresses every year, we're going to have some of that package growth. And that package growth is, and by the way, we go to every address by law. So wouldn't it be best for everybody, including the environment, to have the post office delivering all packages? But that package growth demands different type of equipment and larger equipment and larger buildings. And so a lot of what seems to be driving this network modernization plan is the idea of having big enough buildings to aggregate the packages, these giant sorting machines. Look, we don't love automation, but we're not going to be able to stop automation. We can get on a show some other time, Jacob, and maybe talk about, or if you want to talk about it later in this show, a little bit about how workers can, and the union movement, I think, should be fighting harder for things like a shorter work week with no cut and pay to deal with automation. But we're not going to stop the automation. And so the automation's here, and it's driving changes in our machinery, in our buildings, in our transportation, and yes, at times in our staffing. So the mail mix is changing. The internet has diverted tons of letter mail and what we call flats out of the postal system. And we have to be able to, if we're going to survive and be here for the people of the country, we have to be able to meet those needs. So we try to keep an open mind to some of what's going on. But I have to tell you and your listeners, what's ever on paper that may make some sense, the implementation so far has not been good. And it's not been good in relation to the workers, and it's not been good in relation to the service that the people of this country need and deserve and have a right to under the law. They have a right to what's called, under the law, prompt, reliable, and efficient services. So we have a lot of work to do. And when you say we're working with management, to an extent we are, and to an extent we're not. Because when they're wrong, We're organizing. We have a lot of local unions now that are out there protesting about some of the distances they're going to move mail to be processed in these larger facilities. And if you move mail too far, then you're slowing down the service to the people of the country.
Hey, 5 seconds, just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Right. And what you said about automation has always been something of a bailiwick of mine. That automation on its face really should be great, right? I mean, we can do the same amount of work for less labor time, right? I mean, that should be workers should be able to rejoice when automation comes around. But, the unfortunate reality of it is that the people who, own the companies, they're the ones that get to decide how automation is implemented. And that's why, workers have issues with automation, is because, instead of allowing us to do the same amount of work for the same amount of pay for a shorter time, right? Because we're able, due to automation, to produce more within a short amount of time. Instead of that, what we get is job cuts, and we have to do more in the same amount of time, or sometimes more in more time, because they cut jobs and cut jobs and cut jobs even beyond what the automation would theoretically allow for, right? And then you're left with, after the automation, you're left with people being overworked and all of this stuff. And so, we're completely on the same page there. It's a really important issue, how automation is implemented. What are some of the ways that y'all are fighting back in some of the instances where these changes are potentially endangering the quickness of service and the quality of service for postal customers?
Well, when they consolidate mail into larger facilities, some of it may be 5, 10, 15, 20 miles, 30 miles down the street. But some of the plans that the post office is looking at and beginning to implement, they're taking mail on trucks 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. And so when they do that, and it's called, when they consolidate a whole section of mail, like in North Alabama, you have a service area. And in that service area, you have mail generated for your zip code and the surrounding zip codes. That mail, if it gets taken on a truck 4 or 5 hours away, is definitely going to slow down. But when the post office does that by their own regulations, they have to have community meetings for the local customers, the local workers who also are postal customers, to come and speak out. And our locals have been doing a terrific job in certain parts of the country to organize for those meetings. We've had meetings with hundreds and hundreds of postal patrons there, both individual, small business, sometimes large business, who want the mail to stay local so that they get the best possible service. We're also certainly fighting back in our headquarters level conversations and discussions with postal management. But the main way we fight back in this type of issue, Jacob, is to unite with the people of the country. The APW, first and foremost, our members are really, really and extremely dedicated to the mission of the Postal Service. I remember years ago, I was on a workroom floor in a big Midwest city, and these two women approached me and said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And they had tears in their eyes because the mail wasn't moved like it should be. And they said, "This isn't what I would want with my mail, and this isn't what I want to do for the people of this country." So we're extremely dedicated to the mission, and we unite with the people in defense of their interests. And we, of course, have common interests. We also are fighting back in terms of the whole service question, which is beyond just this modernization plan. We are also fighting for better staffing, which then creates better service. There's the post office, and this is a management decision, not a union decision, is in many cases the retail units where you go in and rent a post office box, buy stamps, get a money order, bring a package, return a package, get a certified letter, that they're so short-staffed if somebody has a vacation, if somebody has a day, if somebody has an emergency, if somebody has a sick child, there's actually nobody else to cover it. In many cases, they're just shuttering the post office for a day or two. That's absolutely outrageous and wrong. So we stand with the people of the country demanding better service. And by the way, when we get better staffing, which creates better service, we also get better working conditions for the postal worker. When you're short-staffed, the stress is higher, the hassles are higher, and the working conditions are far worse. So those are some of the ways that we're fighting back. We have a new campaign called Building a Better Post Office. You can go on to, your listeners could go onto our website, apwu.org, and find out about how they can help with petitions and other things to get better staffing and better service.
The better staffing is not just with the postal workers. Some people may not know that the Postal Service, there are 4 unions broadly. Maybe there's some other, but there are 4 major players representing postal service workers: the American Postal Workers Union, National Association of Letter Carriers, National Association of Rural Letter Carriers, and the National Postal Mail Handlers Union. So the letter carriers have their contract coming up in May, is my understanding. That's when it expires. When does APWU's contract expire? When do y'all begin negotiations?
So there are 2, and you actually did something that I probably couldn't have done. You got all those names right in one way, because we tend to say shortcuts like Mail Handlers Union and Rural Carriers. So the city letter carriers, their contract expired last May of 2023. So they're still in negotiations. The rural letter carriers expire this May, and our contract, which covers almost 200,000 workers. These are the clerks you'll see in the retail units, the clerks that sort mail through the night that you don't see, the clerks that help get the letter carriers onto the street every day. We represent the maintenance employees, both building and machine. We represent the motor vehicle drivers and those who repair the trucks and the vehicles and some others. Our contract expires on September 20th of this year. It's the largest single bargaining unit of any union in the country this year that's up this year. And we open our negotiations on June 25th. So it's a few months out. We're already deeply preparing and organizing for it.
For the letter carriers, y'all, since y'all are federal employees, even though the Postal Service has a little bit of a different structure than other federal agencies, y'all are federal employees, so we don't have the right to strike. I'm a member of AFGE, and but so what happens is basically if there's an impasse, instead of going to a strike, then federal unions will go to arbitration. And some letter carriers that I've spoken to, and this isn't like I have inside knowledge from the bargaining committee. This is just people that I'm talking to on the ground here in Huntsville. They've talked about the UPS contract, and they're hoping that is helpful to them in their arbitration, making the case that, look, you need to really significantly increase pay here, because we as letter carriers, we can't keep up. Because why would you work as a letter carrier for the Postal Service making, $5, $6, $7 an hour less than you could doing the same thing at UPS, right? And so are y'all kind of basically tracking a similar position for if you have to take it to arbitration?
Well, it's an interesting question. Let me go back to the question of the right to strike. You are correct that we do not have the legal right to strike. And it would be unusual to have one, but in our history, we have one. We have had one. We had the Great Postal Strike in 1970. That's what actually led to the creation of the APW that merged 5 of the unions. I wished we had all merged then, because I've always been a believer that when we're dealing with one company, we should have one union and not be pitted against each other. But that was a victorious strike. Nobody was fired. They brought the country to their knees. But so I just want to clear up that the right of workers to strike is an inherent right. If you're going to use it in more difficult circumstances, and it's never easy to strike, then you just have to be that much more organized, and you have to have a situation where workers are just to the point that enough was enough. And that's what happened in 1970. When you raise going to arbitration for a contract, you are correct. What's happening around the world with the rest of the workers has an impact on what happens in arbitration. The 1970 law, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds for your listeners, but it basically established what they call a wage comparability standard, that we're supposed to be paid similar to those doing similar work, workers doing similar work in the private sector. In 1970, we were way below, so that helped uplift us. But in more recent decades, it's been used against us to say that we need to go down. So when workers are doing better around the country, and I'm glad to be talking to you at a time that there is a new militancy, the United Auto Workers, the UPS workers, the SAG-AFTRA workers, the Amazon workers stirring like in your part of the country and other parts. That kind of motion will certainly help us at the bargaining table. Now, having said that, we're not private sector. We're not this massively profitable companies like the big three were or UPS is. In fact, the Postal Service is not supposed to make tons of money. It's supposed to break even and be there for the people of the country. But when UPS workers do similar work in the private sector, that's certainly going to help us. So hats off to the organized Teamster UPS workers and their leadership for standing strong, getting some real gains. And we believe that the advances of other workers can only help us at our bargaining table, even given some of the differences that are going on.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.